I walked past my bedroom and heard my son whisper to his wife, "Mom can sleep in the garage. This room is perfect for us." They were measuring my walls. I said nothing. The next morning, they came for breakfast and found all their belongings on the lawn, because what they didn't know was, subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. The cup was warm in my hands, the steam carrying the scent of chamomile and lemon. I had just come from the kitchen, the final chore of the evening done, and was heading to the sanctuary of my bedroom. The hallway was dim, lit only by the last of the evening sun filtering through the window at the far end. My slippers made no sound on the runner my husband, Henry, had bought in Morocco decades ago. I was 3 steps from my door when I heard it. A soft click, then the distinct zip of a metal tape measure retracting. I stopped. The door was open a crack, maybe 2 inches. A slice of my room was visible, the edge of my dresser, the framed photograph of Henry on our wedding day. Then I heard Marcus's voice, hushed but clear. "Just over 14 feet on this wall, plenty of space for the bed and the credenza." Perfect. That was Chloe. Her voice was always several degrees cooler than the room. "The ensuite is already huge. We won't even need to touch it. Just new fixtures." I did not move. The steam from my tea curled up past my face. "We'll need to get her things out, obviously," Marcus said. There was a shuffling sound like someone stepping over something. "We can start boxing the non-essentials next weekend. Tell her it's a deep clean." "Where will we put it all?" Chloe asked. I could picture her, one hand on her hip, surveying my space with the eye of a conquistador. "The garage, for now. We'll sort it later. Most of this is just old stuff anyway." My breath felt very still in my chest. The cup was almost too hot against my palms, but I did not adjust my grip. Then Chloe spoke again, and her words were precise, surgical. "And where will she go during the renovation?" A pause. I could hear the unspoken conversation in that silence. I knew my son's face, even when I could not see it. He would be looking at the floor or out the window, a slight tension in his jaw. He did that when he was about to say something he knew was wrong. "She can sleep in the garage," he said, his voice dropping even lower, as if the walls themselves might judge him. "It's dry, it's insulated. We can set up the daybed from the guest room. It's temporary, just until we get this room done." "Temporary," Chloe echoed, not a question. "And then?" Another pause. Longer. The floor beneath my feet, the solid oak Henry and I had saved for, seemed to tilt. I put one hand flat against the wall to steady myself. The wallpaper, a faded floral we had chosen together, felt smooth and cool. Then, "We'll see," Marcus said, but his tone was weak. "It's a big space out there. We could finish it properly, put in a proper wall, a small bathroom. It would be like a studio apartment for her." "Much more practical," Chloe said, and I heard the smile in her voice. "This room is perfect for us, Marcus. It gets the morning light. It's the master suite. It's what we deserve." I closed my eyes. The words hung in the air of my hallway, my home. "Mom can sleep in the garage. This room is perfect for us." They were not discussing a hypothetical future. They were measuring. They were planning paint colors and fixtures. They were deciding the fate of my life, of Henry's and my life, between whispers and clicks of a tape measure. I thought of the garage. It was clean. I made sure of that. It held the lawnmower, Henry's old workbench still littered with his tools exactly as he left them, boxes of Christmas decorations, and the daybed. The daybed my grandson was supposed to sleep in when he visited, a grandson who never came because Chloe was focusing on her career. It smelled of cut grass and motor oil and memories packed away. They were inside my room, my private space where Henry had died peacefully 6 years ago, and they were reducing it to square footage for their own use. They were reducing me to a problem to be relocated, my history to old stuff to be boxed. A coldness spread from my core, outward. It was not shock anymore. It It was a solid, heavy understanding. The tea in my cup had stopped steaming. I opened my eyes. I did not push the door open. I did not scream. I did not let the cup fall from my hands. I stood there, and I listened a little longer. They discussed paint, a neutral gray perhaps, and whether to tear out the built-in bookshelves Henry had made for me. Chloe thought they looked dated. Marcus agreed. When I heard them move toward the door, I turned. Silently, I walked back down the hallway into the living room. I sat in my armchair, the one by the window that looks out onto my garden. I placed the cup of cold tea on the side table. I folded my hands in my lap. I heard their footsteps, light and conspiratorial, coming down the hall. They appeared in the doorway to the living room. Marcus looked surprised, then smoothed his expression into a casual smile. "Oh, hey, Mom. I didn't know you were in here." "I just sat down," I said. My voice sounded normal. It was my own voice. "We were just, checking on a squeaky floorboard in your room," Marcus said, shoving his hands in his pockets. The tape measure was a visible bulge in his jacket. "Yes," Chloe added, her smile bright and empty. "We want to make sure everything is safe and sound for you." "That's thoughtful," I said. I looked from one to the other. My son. The boy I read to at this very window. The man I helped through college, whose wedding I paid for, who still brought his laundry over every other week because Chloe said their building's machines were unclean. The woman he married, who accepted my help and my home with a condescending grace, who had never once asked about the history of the house or the stories in its walls. They stood there, waiting for my usual offer of a snack, for my benign curiosity. I said nothing. I just looked at them. After a moment, the silence grew awkward. "Well, we should get going," Chloe said, touching Marcus's arm. "Big day tomorrow." "Right. Love you, Mom." Marcus came over and kissed my cheek. His kiss felt like a brand. "Good night," I said. I listened to the front door close. I listened to their car start and drive away. The house settled back into its usual quiet. But it was a different quiet now. It was a quiet filled with the echoes of their whispers, the ghost of their measurements. I did not cry. The hurt was there, a deep bruised ache beneath my breastbone. But on top of it, layered over it like a sheet of ice, was the cold clarity. They had shown me who they were. They had drawn their plans, and in that moment, sitting in the chair Henry had always called his, but was really mine, I drew my own. The first step was simple. I would say nothing. My silence would not be the silence of defeat, but the silence of a door closing, the silence before a storm. I finished the cold tea. It was bitter. I carried the cup to the kitchen, washed it, and placed it in the drainer. Then I walked back to my bedroom. I stood in the doorway and looked in. Nothing was out of place, yet the air felt violated. I walked to the window and looked out at the garden, now dark. My hands were steady. Tomorrow they would come for Sunday breakfast. They would smile. They would probe. And I would smile back. I would pour the orange juice and pass the platter of bacon. And while I did, I would begin. The morning light was different. It fell across the kitchen counter in the same bright squares, but I saw it now as a measuring tool, illuminating the space they wanted. I moved through my routine with mechanical precision. The bacon was laid on the pan. The dough for the cinnamon rolls, started the night before, was punched down and shaped. I set the table with the good china, the set Henry's mother had given us. It was Sunday. They would come. At 9 o'clock, I heard their car in the driveway. I wiped my hands on my apron and took a slow breath before the smile found its way to my face. It felt like a physical object I had to lift and hold in place. "Mom!" Marcus called as he came in, his voice a little too loud, too hearty. He carried a bakery box. "We brought pastries from that new place downtown." Chloe followed, a vision in a cream-colored sweater and tight jeans. "Eleanor, something smells amazing. You really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble." She air-kissed near my cheek, her perfume a cloud of citrus and sandalwood that clashed with the smell of frying bacon. "No trouble," I said, taking the box. "It's what I do." I turned to put it on the counter, letting the smile drop for a second where they couldn't see. They settled at the table, the picture of a devoted young couple. Marcus poured the orange juice I had set out. Chloe complimented the centerpiece, a simple bowl of hydrangeas from the garden. The performance had begun. We made small talk through the first part of the meal. Marcus discussed his work. Chloe talked about a decorating seminar she'd attended. I passed plates, refilled coffee, and nodded. I watched their eyes. They kept glancing at each other, little silent signals. It was Chloe who began the probing. She took a delicate bite of a cinnamon roll and said, "This house is just so wonderful, Eleanor. So much character. But it must be a lot for you to manage all on your own." "I manage fine," I said, spreading butter on my toast. "The yard is the hardest part, but the Thompson boy mows it." "Still," Marcus chimed in, leaning forward, "it's a big place. 3 bedrooms, 2 living areas. A lot of empty space." "It's not empty," I said. "It's full of my things. Your father's things." A flicker of irritation passed over Chloe's face, quickly smoothed away. "Of course. We just worry about you, all these stairs, and that old furnace in the basement. Dad always said it was temperamental." She'd never called Henry Dad before. The word felt like a theft. I took a sip of coffee. "It works. I have it serviced every fall." "We were thinking," Marcus said, his tone shifting into what he must have believed was a gentle, reasonable one. "Maybe it's time to think about some updates, to make things easier, safer for you, modernize a bit." "Updates," I repeated. "Nothing drastic," Chloe said quickly, her smile sharp. "Just thoughtful changes to improve your quality of life. Maybe start with the main bedroom. It's such a large room, but the layout is a bit old-fashioned. We could reconfigure it for you, create a more efficient sitting area." I looked at her. "Reconfigure it?" "Well, you spend so much time in there," she said. "We want it to be perfect for you, completely tailored to your needs now." The words were syrup, but her eyes were like chips of glass. "And where would I sleep during this reconfiguration?" I asked, my voice flat, curious. Marcus shifted in his chair. "We've got it all figured out, Mom. Don't you worry. We'd take care of everything. There's that perfectly good daybed in the garage. We could move it into the living room here temporarily, or we could even set you up in the garage itself. It's clean, it's dry. It would be like a little adventure." "An adventure," I said. "Just for a little while," he pressed, mistaking my calm for consideration. "Then, if you liked the space, we could talk about making it more permanent, finishing it out properly. It would be cozier, less to clean." I put my fork down. The clink of silverware on the plate was loud in the sudden quiet. They were both watching me, their faces eager, expectant. They had rehearsed this. They were offering me my own exile as a gift. I made my face soften. I let a small, grateful smile touch my lips. "You two are so thoughtful," I said, "always thinking of me." Chloe's shoulders relaxed slightly. Marcus beamed. "We just want what's best for you, Mom." "I know you do," I said. "It's a lot to consider. These old bones are used to their routine." I gestured vaguely around the kitchen. "This house, it's Henry, it's us. Changing things feels like, well, you understand. But change can be good," Chloe insisted, her voice tightening. "It can be refreshing. You shouldn't be trapped in the past." "Trapped," I said softly. I looked at Marcus. "Do you think I'm trapped, Marcus?" He looked uncomfortable. "No, Mom, of course not. Chloe just means it's a big house for one person. We want to help you simplify." I nodded slowly, as if absorbing his wisdom. "I'll think about it. I promise. It's very generous of you to plan so carefully for my comfort." The tension bled out of them. They had planted the seed. They thought it had taken root. The rest of the breakfast was filled with lighter talk. They offered to help with the dishes. I declined. As they were leaving, Chloe turned on the doorstep. We'll come by next Saturday to start going through some things, okay? Just some light sorting to see what you might want to keep handy. Her words were a directive, not a request. That sounds fine, I said. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned my back against the solid wood. The kitchen was a mess of greasy plates and sticky syrup. The smell of their expensive pastries lingered, cloying and sweet. I walked to the sink and looked out the window. Their car was gone. The cold clarity from the night before had solidified into a plan. Their performance had been convincing. They believed their own narrative, that they were benevolent caretakers gently steering a frail old woman toward a sensible, smaller space. They had looked at my home, my life, and seen only an inefficient layout and unused square footage. I started the hot water. I washed the good china myself, feeling the weight of each plate, the smooth curve of each cup. These were not just dishes. They were part of the inventory of my life, a life they were so casually trying to box up and relocate. By the time the kitchen was clean, the plan was no longer a vague intention. It was a list of steps. The first step was complete. I had confirmed their intentions in the clear light of day. I had seen the eager greed behind their careful smiles. The second step would begin tomorrow. I would need Cynthia, and then I would need a lawyer. I folded the apron and hung it on its hook. The house was silent again, but the silence was mine now. It was the silence of preparation. I went to the living room and sat in my chair. I did not look at the garden. I looked at the room around me, at the walls that held me, and I began to calculate. The first call on Monday morning was to Cynthia. I waited until 9, knowing she would have finished her first cup of coffee and be scanning the morning news on her tablet. Her voice, when she answered, was its usual brisk self. "Eleanor, I was just thinking about you. Did you survive the Sunday invasion?" "Barely." I stood at my kitchen window, the phone pressed to my ear. "I need to talk to you. Not over the phone. Can I come over?" A pause. Then her tone shifted, losing its lightness. "Of course. Right now. I'll put the kettle on." Cynthia's house was 2 streets over, a mirror of my own in layout but filled with bold colors and modern art. She opened the door before I could knock, her sharp eyes scanning my face. She was a tall woman, my age, with closely cropped gray hair and a way of standing that took up space. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, ushering me into her sun-filled kitchen. "Not a ghost," I said, taking a seat at her table. "A blueprint." I told her everything. The measuring tape, the whispers, the garage, the conversation over breakfast. I recited their words as accurately as I could, my voice flat and without inflection. I did not cry. I presented the facts, like evidence before a judge. Cynthia listened without interrupting. Her face grew harder with each sentence. When I finished, she slapped her palm flat on the table, making the sugar bowl jump. I knew it. That little ice queen has been working on him for years, turning him into her personal accessorizer. But this is monstrous. "They think they're being practical," I said. "They're being vultures," she snapped, "waiting for the last breath. Except you're not even close to dying and they're trying to shove you into a storage unit." She got up, pacing the length of her kitchen. "What are you going to do? You have to confront them, tell them you heard, throw them out." "No," I said. The word was quiet but firm. She stopped pacing and looked at me. "No." Confrontation gives them a chance to explain, to justify, to wear me down with more talk about my well-being and their generous plans. I looked down at my hands, folded on her table. I heard their plan. Now I will execute mine. A slow smile spread across Cynthia's face. It was a fierce, approving smile. "All right, I'm listening. What's the plan?" "First, I need to know what I can legally do. The house is in my name, only mine. Henry left it to me outright, but I need to be sure. I need to know my rights, down to the letter." "Lawrence Avery," Cynthia said immediately, sitting back down. "My estate lawyer. He's sharp, He's discreet and he hates bullies. I'll call him right now." "I'd appreciate that." She made the call from the other room. I heard the low murmur of her voice, firm and insistent. When she returned, she had a name, a number, and an appointment time for that afternoon at 2. "He'll see you." Told him it was an urgent matter of predatory family dynamics. He understood. "Thank you, Sin." She reached across the table and gripped my hand. Her fingers were strong. "You don't thank me. You let me help. And you let me watch when it happens." At 1:45, I parked my sensible sedan outside a modest brick office building in the older part of downtown. Lawrence Avery's office was on the 3rd floor. It was paneled in dark wood and smelled of old books and lemon polish. He was a man in his late 50s with a calm, measured demeanor. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said, gesturing to a chair. "Cynthia spoke highly of you and with some urgency. How can I help?" Again, I laid out the facts. I showed him the deed I had brought from my safe deposit box. I told him what I had overheard and the subsequent breakfast conversation. I did not embellish. I did not vent my anger. I stated the situation as a legal problem. He listened, steepling his fingers. When I finished, he asked a few precise questions. Were their names on any utilities? Had I given them written permission to reside there? Had I ever discussed transferring the title? The answer to all was no. Marcus had a key. They stayed over occasionally. They stored belongings here. That was all. Mr. Avery opened a file and placed the deed inside. "Mrs. Beaumont, the law here is very clear. This is your sole and separate property. Your son and daughter-in-law have no legal interest in it, no matter their familial relationship or their personal expectations. They are, in the eyes of the law, guests, or given their stored possessions, licensees." "What does that mean for my options?" "See, it means," he said, leaning forward slightly, "that you may revoke their license to be on the property or to store belongings there at any time, for any reason. You are not a landlord. They are not tenants. There is no formal eviction process required. You simply need to give them reasonable notice to retrieve their property before you take steps to secure the premises." What is reasonable notice? That can be subjective, but given that they do not live there full time and that you are the wronged party in what seems to be a scheme of intentional emotional coercion, a court would likely look favorably on a short time frame. 24 hours is often considered reasonable for a licensee to collect personal effects. A solid feeling, like a stone settling in my stomach, took hold. It was the feeling of confirmed power. If I were to have their belongings removed from the house and placed outside, and then I changed the locks, would I be within my rights? He considered this. If you provided them notice first, yes, the notice can be verbal, but it is better to have a record, a text message, an email, something that establishes the time and date of the notice. Then, after the reasonable period has elapsed, you may remove the items to a location where they can retrieve them, the front yard, for example, and secure the home against re-entry. You should not dispose of the property, merely make it accessible for them to take. I nodded slowly. I understand. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said, his voice softening a degree, "what they are attempting is unconscionable. The law is on your side. Use it." I left his office with the deed back in my purse and a business card in my wallet. The afternoon sun was bright. I got into my car and sat for a moment, the lawyer's words echoing in the quiet space. Reasonable notice. 24 hours. Secure the premises. The cold clarity was now a roadmap. Step 1. Confirm the betrayal. Step 2. Secure an ally and legal authority. Both were complete. I drove home not with anger, but with a focused determination. The hurt was still there, a dull ache, but it was compartmentalized now, placed in a box marked later. Right now, there was work to do. I needed to define what belonged to them. I needed to find a moving company. I needed to draft a text message. The house welcomed me back with its familiar silence. I walked from room to room, not as a heartbroken mother, but as a surveyor. I looked at the desk in the second bedroom, now Marcus's home office. I looked at the closet in the guest room, half full of Chloe's off-season clothes and fancy luggage. I looked at the shelves in the living room that held their books and decorative items, interspersed with my own. It was all here, the physical proof of their gradual encroachment. Tonight, I would begin the inventory. But first, I sat at the kitchen table, took out my phone, and began to type a draft. The words had to be perfect. They had to be clear, legal, and utterly devoid of the emotion that was churning beneath my skin. This was no longer a family matter. It was a transaction, and I was about to conclude it on my terms. The draft text message remained unsent. Sending it was the trigger, and I was not ready yet. First, I needed to perform the separation physically. I did not pack a single item of my own. Instead, I went to the basement and brought up a stack of flattened cardboard boxes Henry had saved from various deliveries over the years. I assembled them with packing tape, the ripping sound loud in the quiet house. I started in what they called the guest room. It had been meant as a nursery once. That hope had faded years ago, but the room had retained a soft, hopeful quality until Chloe began using the closet. I opened the double doors. Inside were her things: expensive winter coats wrapped in plastic, designer dresses on padded hangers, a set of matching leather luggage. I took the first dress down. It was a deep emerald green, the kind of dress you wear to a cocktail party where you intend to be noticed. I remembered the night she wore it. It was their 3rd anniversary. Marcus had brought her here for a photograph before they went to some downtown restaurant. She had twirled in my living room, the fabric swishing, while Marcus looked on with adoration. I had taken the picture. That night, after they left, Henry had put his arm around me and said, "She'll never love that boy as much as he loves her." He was right, of course. He usually was. I folded the dress, not with care, but with efficiency, and placed it in a box. I labeled the box in black marker, Chloe Closet. Next were the coats, a cashmere blend, a wool trench, gifts from Marcus, I presumed. Each represented a piece of my son's income, of the financial stability I had helped him achieve, now hanging in my house as a placeholder for a future that required my absence. Into the box they went. The luggage was next, a 3-piece set. I recalled Marcus asking me for a loan to buy it for Chloe's birthday 2 years ago. "She deserves the best, Mom," he had said. I had given him the money. He had never paid it back. I hadn't minded then. Now, I minded. I placed the suitcases by the door. I moved to the second bedroom, Marcus's office. It had been his childhood room. The desk was not the one from his boyhood. That small, scarred wooden desk was long gone. This was a large, modern standing desk he had purchased last year and assembled in my garage, leaving the packaging for me to dispose of. On it sat an expensive computer monitor, a wireless keyboard, a sleek lamp. In the drawers were his spare computer parts, old tax documents, and a jumble of cables. I unplugged everything, coiling the cords neatly. Each item felt like a piece of a claim he was staking. This was no longer the room where my son did his homework. It was a satellite office for a man who saw my home as an extension of his assets. I packed the electronics into a box lined with bubble wrap from my basement. Marcus, office fragile. The bookshelf in the living room was the most interwoven. My books, well-loved novels, gardening references, Henry's history volumes, sat alongside their bestsellers and interior design catalogs. I took down every book that was not mine. One, a thick hardcover on minimalist living, fell open to a dog-eared page. A passage was highlighted in yellow. True freedom comes from unburdening yourself of the past, both in objects and in obligations. Chloe's handwriting in the margin. So true. I closed the book and put it in the box. MISCBOOKS. There were decorative items. A cold, abstract metal sculpture Chloe had brought over one day and simply placed on the mantel, displacing a framed photo of Henry and me at the beach. a set of geometric ceramic vases that had never held flowers, a faux fur throw blanket still with its tags, draped over the back of my reading chair. Each item was an intrusion, a taste imposed upon a space it did not belong to. As I worked, the memories did not come as waves of sadness, but as sharp, clear confirmations. Buying Marcus his first proper suit for job interviews, saving for months to help with his down payment on the apartment, an act of love Chloe had called a smart investment in your future, preparing the guest room with a new crib, never used, after a brief, hopeful comment from Marcus about maybe starting a family soon. The crib had been donated years later, a quiet, private grief. That room had stayed empty until Chloe filled the closet. By late afternoon, the boxes and grouped items formed a small archipelago in the living room and hallway. The physical mass of their presence in my life was startling. It was not just things. It was the space they occupied, the silent demand of their ownership. My phone rang. It was Cynthia. "Well, have you started?" "I'm surrounded by boxes," I said, looking at the labeled stacks. "Good. And the text?" "Not yet. Tomorrow. The movers are scheduled for the day after at 5:30 in the morning." "You found someone?" "Yes. Stanley and Sons. They have a contract with the Senior Center for Relocations. They are discreet, efficient, and used to following clear instructions. I spoke to the manager. He understood the situation." Cynthia let out a low laugh. "Eleanor Beaumont, you are a general. I'm proud of you. Do you need help tonight? I can come over, bring wine, we can pack the rest." "No," I said. "This is something I need to do alone. It's an inventory of more than just their things." She was silent for a moment. "I understand. Call me if you need anything at all. I'll be on standby for the big day." After we hung up, I walked through the rooms again. The house looked different. Their encroachments had been removed from shelves and closets and piled into a neutral, removable state. The spaces they left behind were not empty. They were reclaimed. The ghost of the crib was somehow less painful than the physical presence of Chloe's winter coats. I made a simple dinner. I ate at the kitchen table, looking at the boxes in the next room. The anger was still there, a steady hum, but it was now harnessed. It was the energy that had filled these boxes that would direct the movers. I finished eating and washed my plate. I went to the living room and sat in my chair. The geometric vases were gone from the side table. In their place, I put the photograph of Henry and me at the beach. We were smiling, squinting into the sun. Our future had felt endless then. In a way, it still was. It was my future. And it would not be measured out by a tape held in my son's hands. It would be measured by me, from this chair, in this room. The inventory was complete. The next step was delivery. I did not go to bed. The house was too quiet, the boxes in the living room too present. I turned off the main lights, leaving only a single lamp on in the living room. The clock on the mantel read 10:30. In 7 hours, the movers would arrive. I went to the hall closet and took out the large, leather-bound photo album from the top shelf. It was heavy. I carried it to the sofa, sat beside the tower of boxes, and opened it on my lap. The first page held our wedding photo. Henry, so young and serious in his suit, his hand firmly in mine. My own face filled with a hope that had never truly faded, even after he was gone. We had bought this house a year later. It was a stretch then, a financial gamble that kept us eating beans and rice for months. But it was ours. I turned the pages. Marcus as a baby in the backyard, laughing in a plastic wading pool. Marcus on his first day of school, holding my hand tightly at the bus stop. Henry teaching him to ride a bike right there on the driveway, his hands steady on the seat until he let go. The photos were a map of our life within these walls, on this land. There was a picture of Henry in what was now Marcus's office, then just a spare room. He was at a drafting table designing a backyard deck he would build that summer. His concentration was absolute. He looked up at the camera, at me, and his expression softened into a smile that still made my heart ache. This was his space, too. His dreams had taken shape in this room. I turned to a later section, Marcus's college graduation. He stood between us, his smile wide, his future a blank page. We were so proud. We had paid his tuition, sacrificing vacations, driving old cars, so he could start without debt. The caption below, in my handwriting, read, "Our greatest achievement." The final pages were thinner. Photos of just Henry and me after Marcus moved out. Trips we took, quiet anniversaries at home. Then the last pictures of Henry, thinner but still smiling in his garden chair. He had looked at this house, at me, and said, "It's all yours now, Ellie. Keep it safe. It's your freedom." I closed the album. The quiet in the house was no longer empty. It was filled with these echoes. They were my witnesses. This was not just a house. It was the museum of a life lived with intention and love. It was my freedom, exactly as Henry had said. A cold sliver of doubt tried to wedge itself in. He is your son, your only child. Is this the end? I looked at the boxes labeled with his name. He had made his choice. He had chosen Chloe's whispered plans over a lifetime of my support. He had measured my bedroom for his own use. The doubt evaporated, burned away by the clear, harsh light of that memory. I stood up and placed the album back on the shelf, not in the closet, but in plain view. Then I picked up my phone. The drafted text message was still there. I read it one final time. Marcus, Chloe. This is to provide formal notice that your license to store personal property at my home at address is revoked. You have 24 hours from the timestamp of this message to remove all your belongings. Any items not removed by 5:30 a.m. tomorrow will be placed outside the property for your collection. After that time, the locks will be changed. Do not attempt to enter the premises without my express permission. Eleanor. It was clear. It was legal. It was a guillotine blade. I pressed send. The time was 11:17 p.m. The countdown began. I expected an immediate flurry of calls, of angry texts. The phone remained silent. They were probably asleep or watching a movie in their sleek apartment, oblivious. The silence was more unnerving than any outburst would have been. It meant they did not yet know the ground had fallen away beneath them. I spent the next hour on a final walkthrough. I checked each room to ensure nothing of theirs remained. In the guest room closet, I found a single silk scarf caught at the back of a shelf. I added it to the appropriate box. In the bathroom, I removed their spare toiletries from the cabinet. I took the spare key to the front door from its hook inside the pantry door and placed it on the kitchen counter. At midnight, I made a pot of strong tea. I did not drink it to calm my nerves. I drank it to stay alert. I sat at the kitchen table, a notepad before me. I wrote down a sequence of events for the morning. 5:15 a.m. Await movers. Confirm Stanley and Sons. 5:30 a.m. Movers arrive. Direct them to boxes and items in living room/hall, then to office furniture, then guest room closet. Supervise placement on front lawn, neatly, away from sprinklers. Ensure all items removed from garage, their things only. 6 a.m. Approx. Movers depart. 6:15 a.m. Locksmith scheduled arrival. 7 a.m. Expected arrival of Marcus Chloe for breakfast. The notepad held my plan, a series of actions that felt both surreal and utterly logical. This was a transaction of severance. The phone vibrated on the table at 12:45. A text, not from Marcus, from Chloe. Eleanor, what is this? Is this some kind of joke? We need to talk. Call us immediately. I did not reply. I put the phone face down. The first ripple had reached them. Soon it would be a wave. The hours passed slowly. I did not try to sleep. I watched the clock. I listened to the house settle. At 3 a.m., I went to the front window and looked out at the dark, silent street. The lawn was a blank canvas. In a few hours, it would hold the entire material representation of their presumption. I thought of Henry again. Not the sick Henry, but the strong one, the builder. He would not have hesitated. He would have protected what was ours, what was mine. He would have been standing right beside me, his arms crossed, a silent, imposing sentinel. By 4:30, a faint gray light began to outline the trees. The birds started their first calls. My tea was long cold. I washed the cup and put it away. I dressed in comfortable slacks and a warm sweater. I brushed my hair and applied a minimal amount of lipstick. It was not for them. It was for me. I needed to look exactly like who I was, the lady of the house, in command. At 5:10, I turned on the porch light. I unlocked the front door and left it slightly ajar. I stood in the doorway, the cool dawn air biting at my cheeks. I listened. At 5:25, I saw the headlights of a large truck turn slowly onto my street. It moved quietly, its engine a low rumble. It was a plain white truck with Stanley and Sons in simple blue lettering on the door. It pulled into my driveway. 2 men got out. They were dressed in dark uniforms. The older one, who had a kind, weathered face, tipped his cap to me. "Mrs. Beaumont?" "Yes." "We're here for the exterior relocation job. Everything is inside," I said, my voice steady. "Please follow me." I turned and led them into my home. The night watch was over. The execution had begun. The 2 movers stood in my foyer, their presence large and practical in the quiet house. The older one, who had introduced himself as Joe, looked at the stacks of boxes and the items grouped by the door. He gave a small, understanding nod. "Right then. We'll start with the loose boxes, then the furniture. The desk and chair in the second bedroom on the left are to go," I said, my voice calm. "And all contents of the closet in the first bedroom on the right. Only those rooms. Everything else stays." "Understood, ma'am." They worked with a quiet, efficient rhythm. Joe and the younger man, Sam, hefted the first boxes. I held the door open as they carried them out. They placed them on the lawn, near the sidewalk, but on my property, as I had instructed. The sky was lightening from charcoal to a cool, pale gray. The air smelled of damp grass and dawn. I watched them make trip after trip. The boxes formed a neat, rectangular block on the lawn. Chloe, closet. Marcus, office, fragile. The labels faced the house, a silent indictment. They brought out the suitcases, setting them upright beside the boxes. They carried out the abstract metal sculpture, the geometric vases, the faux fur throw. Each object looked absurd and out of place on the dewy grass. A ceramic vase caught the first weak ray of sunlight. Next, they went into Marcus's office. I heard the soft grunt of effort, the careful shuffling as they disassembled the standing desk. They brought out the pieces first, then the heavy desktop. They placed it on the grass near the boxes, then the office chair, a sleek ergonomic model that had cost more than my first refrigerator. It looked like a stranded insect on the lawn. The final phase was the guest room closet. They emerged with arms full of garments on hangers, the plastic shrouds rustling. They had brought a portable garment rack. They assembled it on the lawn and hung the dresses, the coats, the blouses. The emerald green dress swayed gently in the faint morning breeze. It was a bizarre, silent fashion show on my front grass. Joe approached me, wiping his hands on his trousers. "That's the last of it from inside, Mrs. Beaumont. You mentioned the garage?" "Yes. Follow me." I led them through the side door into the garage. Henry's workbench, his tools, our gardening supplies, all of that stayed. I pointed to a stack of sealed plastic containers and a few cardboard boxes in the far corner. Only those. They contain their old textbooks, some kitchenware they left here, and other miscellaneous items. They made quick work of it. The plastic bins joined the growing assemblage on the lawn. The final item they brought out was the new expensive area rug Marcus and Chloe had purchased as a gift for my bedroom just last month. It was still rolled up in its plastic wrapping. They had brought it over, placed it in my room, and said, "See how it brightens up the space?" It was a test, a placeholder. I had thanked them and left it there. Now Joe and Sam carried the heavy roll out and laid it horizontally at the front of the collection, like a weird carpeted welcome mat. It was done. The front lawn was transformed. In the cool, clean light of early morning, it looked like the world's most surreal yard sale. A complete life's worth of encroachment, neatly displayed for the neighborhood to see. Joe presented me with a clipboard to sign. The work order read, "Exterior relocation of licensee property." I signed my name with a steady hand. "Thank you for your discretion," I said. "Not our business, ma'am," Joe said, meeting my eyes. "You have a good day." They climbed into their truck, which was now empty. The engine started with a rumble, and they backed slowly out of the driveway. Their taillights disappeared around the corner. The silence returned, but it was different. It was the silence after a storm has passed. I stood on the porch, my arms wrapped around myself against the chill. I surveyed my handiwork. The lawn was a perfect record of their audacity. Every book, every piece of clothing, every sleek electronic device was a line item in the ledger of their betrayal. The early sun, now cresting the rooftops, began to warm the scene, casting long, sharp shadows from the desk and the garment rack. I saw a curtain twitch in Mrs. Peterson's house across the street. Then another at the Johnsons' next door. The neighborhood was waking up. The show was ready for its audience. My phone, which I had kept in my pocket, began to vibrate. I did not need to look at it to know it was Marcus. The calls had started around 4 a.m. after my text, but I had ignored them all. The vibration stopped, then started again almost immediately. Chloe this time, I imagined. I ignored it. I had one more appointment. At 6:15 precisely, a small van with a magnetic sign that read, "A One Locksmith," pulled up behind where the moving truck had been. A cheerful, middle-aged woman got out, a heavy toolbox in her hand. "Eleanor Beaumont," she called. "Yes, right here." She came up the walk, her eyes flicking over the lawn display with professional neutrality. "Changing out the locks today?" "All exterior doors, front, back, and side garage entry." "You got it." She set to work at the front door. I watched as she removed the old deadbolt and handle with quick, practiced movements. The old hardware, which Henry had installed, was placed in a small cardboard box she had brought. The new lock set was sturdy, brushed nickel. She drilled, she screwed, she tested. The metallic snick of the new deadbolt engaging was a profoundly satisfying sound. She moved to the back door, then to the garage side door. Within 45 minutes, it was done. She handed me 6 new keys, all on a simple ring. "All set. Those old ones won't work anymore." I paid her, and she left. I stood in my foyer holding the cool, new keys. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up the old spare key. I dropped it into the box with the old hardware. It was now a relic. I looked at the clock. It was 7:05. They would be here any moment, expecting Sunday breakfast, expecting to find me compliant, perhaps a little upset about their ignored texts, ready to be soothed and manipulated. I made a fresh pot of coffee not for them, but for myself. I poured a cup, added a splash of milk, and carried it to the living room. I did not sit. I stood by the front window, the lace curtain pulled slightly aside, and waited. At 7:12, their sedan turned onto the street. I saw it slow abruptly, then jerk to a stop at the curb behind the locksmith's van. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's side door opened and Marcus got out. He was dressed in casual Saturday clothes, but he was barefoot. He had thrown on shoes without socks in his haste. He stood on the sidewalk, staring at the lawn, at his entire material life spread out under the morning sun. His mouth was open. The passenger door opened. Chloe emerged. She wore silk pajama pants and a coat thrown over them, her hair in a messy bun. Her hand flew to her mouth, then her head snapped toward the house, toward the window where I stood. The execution was complete. The revelation was beginning. For a long moment, they simply stared. Marcus took a few stumbling steps onto the grass, his bare feet leaving dark prints on the dew-silvered lawn. He reached out and touched the edge of his desk, as if to confirm it was real. Chloe remained rigid by the car, her face a mask of incredulous fury. Then her eyes locked onto mine through the window. She said something sharp to Marcus, and they both stormed up the walkway. I set my coffee cup down on the table by the window. I smoothed my sweater. Then I walked to the front door, unlocked the new deadbolt with a deliberate turn, and stepped out onto the porch, closing the door softly behind me. I did not step down to their level. I remained on the top step, my hands at my sides. "What is this?" Marcus's voice was a strangled shout. He gestured wildly at the lawn. "What the hell is all this, Mom?" I said nothing. I looked at him, then at Chloe. Chloe found her voice first. It was shrill, cutting through the quiet morning. "Have you lost your mind? Our things, our personal belongings. You had no right." She took a step forward as if to rush past me into the house. I did not move from the step. "The locks have been changed," I said, my voice even. "You have no right to enter." That stopped her. She looked at the door, then back at me, her lips pulled back from her teeth. "You unbelievable witch! After everything we've done for you!" Marcus was shaking his head, his confusion giving way to anger. "We've been calling you for hours. You send some crazy legal-sounding text, and then you do this? What is wrong with you?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking from the lawn to me. "Is this about the renovation talk? Is that it? We were just trying to help you." Still, I remained silent. I let their words hang in the air between us. The strategy was simple. Let them expose themselves. Let the neighborhood hear their rage. "You need to let us in right now," Chloe demanded, planting a hand on her hip. "We need to use the bathroom. We need to talk about this like adults, not some deranged stunt." "Everything you need to discuss can be discussed here," I said. "Here?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "With all our stuff on the lawn? The whole neighborhood is watching." As if on cue, Mr. Johnson from 2 houses down came out to retrieve his newspaper. He paused, looking at the scene with open curiosity. "Yes," I said, "they are." My calm seemed to infuriate them further. Chloe's composure shattered. "This is theft. This is illegal. I'm calling the police." She fumbled in her coat pocket for her phone. "You are welcome to call them," I said. "I have already consulted my lawyer. The items were removed after 24 hours' notice, which is legally reasonable for licensee property. They are on my property, undamaged, available for your collection. I am within my rights." The phone wavered in her hand. She hadn't expected that. She looked to Marcus. "Lawyer?" Marcus spat the word. "Since when do you need a lawyer to talk to your own family? What's gotten into you?" He took a step closer, his face pleading now, trying a different tactic. "Mom, please, just tell me what this is about. Is it the garage idea? We were just brainstorming. We'd never make you do anything you didn't want to do." That was the line, the final blatant lie. I felt a cold spike pierce through my control. I kept my expression neutral. "Brainstorming," I repeated. "Yes," he said, seizing on it. "Just talking. Exploring options for your future, for your safety." Chloe, seeing his approach, tried to modulate her tone. It came out strained and false. "Eleanor, we love you. We're just concerned. This house is too much. We were thinking of ways to make it easier. Maybe we communicated it poorly." They were both performing now for me, for the invisible audience of neighbors behind curtains. They were trying to rewrite the script, to paint me as an irrational old woman who had misunderstood their benevolent care. I let them talk. They offered more justifications, more pleas, more veiled threats. They were talking in circles, their story shifting from helpful planners to misunderstood children to outraged victims. With each sentence, they dug the hole deeper. They referenced the new rug, the paint colors, the need for me to be in a manageable space. I stood and listened. I watched Marcus's face grow more desperate as his words failed to move me. I watched Chloe's mask of concern crack again and again into naked hatred. The sun climbed higher, warming the porch boards under my feet. More doors opened. Mrs. Peterson came out to water her already damp hanging baskets, her eyes wide. A car slowed as it drove past. Their energy began to wane. The initial shock had burned off, replaced by a bewildered exhaustion. They had yelled, pleaded, threatened, and I had done nothing but stand there, a silent wall. Finally, Marcus's shoulders slumped. He looked at the ground, at his bare feet in the wet grass. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Why wouldn't you just talk to us? Chloe crossed her arms, shivering slightly in her thin coat. She had given up on pretense. You've humiliated us. You've destroyed your relationship with your son. For what? Because you're a selfish, spiteful old woman who can't stand the thought of anyone else having a nice thing. The air went very still. That was it. The core of it. I had something nice. A home, a room, a life. And they believed they were entitled to take it from me. Marcus looked up at me, his eyes red. Well, aren't you going to say anything? Don't you have anything to say for yourself? They were both looking at me, spent, waiting. The street was quiet. I could feel the attention of the neighborhood focused on my porch. This was the moment. The silence had served its purpose. It had drawn out their truth. Now it was time for mine. I took a slow breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. I looked at my son, then at his wife. My voice, when I finally spoke, did not rise above a conversational tone, but it carried in the morning quiet with the clarity of a bell. You asked me why. You asked me why, I said again, my gaze holding Marcus's. It is very simple. I heard you. He blinked. Heard what? Last Friday evening, I was in the hallway outside my bedroom door. I heard the click of a measuring tape. I heard you say this room was perfect for you. I heard you say I could sleep in the garage, that it was temporary. Then you discussed paint colors. You discussed moving my things. You discussed the built-in bookshelves your father made for me. Chloe thought they looked dated. You agreed. The color drained from Marcus's face. He took a half step backward as if physically pushed. Chloe's mouth opened, but no sound came out for a second. Then, you were eavesdropping? That's a violation of our privacy. I ignored her. I kept my eyes on my son. You were not brainstorming. You were not exploring options. You were measuring. You were planning. You had already decided. The breakfast conversation the next day was just a performance to soften me up for the news. Mom, it wasn't like that, Marcus whispered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. It was exactly like that, I said, my tone still level. You looked at the home I built with your father, the room where he died, and you saw square footage for yourself. You looked at me and saw an obstacle to be relocated to a converted garage. You called my life's accumulation old stuff to be boxed. I turned my head slightly to include Chloe. And you saw a house you wanted. You saw a woman in your way. You whispered in my son's ear until he believed that exiling his mother was a sensible, modern solution. You are twisting this, Chloe cried, her voice rising again. We were thinking of your comfort, your safety. My safety was never in question, I stated. My comfort was here, in my home. You were thinking of your own comfort, your own desire for a master suite. You did not ask me. You did not discuss it with me. You measured behind a closed door and made your plans. That is not family. That is a hostile takeover. I saw Mr. Johnson shake his head slowly. Mrs. Peterson had stopped pretending to water her plants and was just watching, her hand over her heart. So I made my own plans, I continued. I confirmed my legal ownership. I gave you the notice required by law, and I removed from my house every single item that belonged to you. I have not kept a spoon. I have not kept a book. It is all here. You are free to take it. This is the end of your storage here. This is the end of your expectations here. Marcus found his voice, but it was broken. You're throwing me out, your own son. You threw me out first, I said, and for the first time a sliver of raw emotion pierced through my calm. You just assumed I would go quietly into that garage. You assumed this house was already yours in spirit, if not on paper. You assumed my love for you was a lever you could use to move me out of my own life. You were mistaken. We're family, he shouted, a desperate last-ditch appeal. Families do not do this, I said, gesturing to the lawn. Families do not plot behind closed doors. Families do not offer a garage as a future. What you were offering was not a family solution. It was an eviction notice with a smile. I have simply made it official. Chloe grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus, don't listen to her. She's trying to make us look like monsters. She's clearly unstable. We need to get our things and go. We'll deal with this through a lawyer. You are welcome to try, I said. My lawyer, Mr. Avery, has all the documentation. The deed is in my name alone. You are licensees, not tenants. The law is clear, and now, so am I. At that moment, Cynthia appeared at the property line, standing on the sidewalk. She didn't say a word. She simply crossed her arms and nodded once at me, a soldier acknowledging her commander. Her presence was a tangible reinforcement. Marcus followed my gaze and saw her. He saw the neighbors. He saw the full scope of his public shaming. The anger left his face, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. His shoulders hunched. He looked at the ground. Chloe, however, was not defeated. Humiliation curdled into pure, undiluted spite. She pointed a finger at me. You will die alone in that house. You have chosen a building over your own flesh and blood. Everyone can see what kind of woman you are. A bitter, lonely crone. Her words were meant to wound. They bounced off the armor of my certainty. I am not the one standing barefoot on a stranger's lawn, I said quietly. I am in my home. You are the one who is outside. That was the truth, simple and inarguable. It hung in the air. Marcus finally moved. He walked to the garment rack and pulled his wife's emerald green dress off the hanger. He wadded it into a bundle. Come on, Chloe, he said, his voice thick. Let's just get our things and go. Go where? She hissed. We need a truck. This is insane. We'll call someone, he muttered, not looking at her, not looking at me. He walked to their car, opened the trunk, and threw the dress inside. It was an act of surrender. I watched them for a moment longer. Then I turned, inserted my new key into the lock, and opened my front door. I paused on the threshold and looked back one final time. You have until sunset to remove your property from my lawn. After that, I will consider it abandoned and will dispose of it accordingly. I stepped inside my house and closed the door. The solid thud of it closing was the period at the end of my sentence. Through the window, I saw Marcus slowly, mechanically, begin to carry boxes to the car. Chloe stood screaming into her phone, presumably at a rental company. The audience of neighbors, having heard the full story, began to disperse, casting looks of pity at Marcus and looks of disgust at Chloe. My speech was over. The reckoning was complete. Now came the practical, permanent closure. I did not watch them for long. From the living room window, I saw Marcus loading boxes into their sedan's trunk and back seat with a slow, defeated rhythm. Chloe was still on the phone, her free hand chopping the air. A rental truck arrived an hour later, and two young men in matching T-shirts began the heavier work of loading the desk, the chair, the garment rack. The scene lost its dramatic power and became simply a moving job, awkward and public. I drew the curtain and walked away. The house was different. The absence of their things was a physical relief, like a deep breath after being constricted. The silence was my own. I made a fresh pot of tea and took the cup to the kitchen table. I pulled out my phone and my address book. My first call was to Lawrence Avery. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Beaumont, Cynthia informed me there were developments this morning. The developments have concluded, I said. Their property has been removed. The locks are changed. I have one more matter to settle. Your will? Yes, the existing one leaves the house and the majority of my estate to Marcus, with a small bequest to Cynthia. I want to revoke that entirely. I can prepare a new document for you. What are your wishes? I had thought about this. The idea had formed in the cold hours of the night watch. I want the house and all my assets, after specific bequests to Cynthia and a few charities, to go to the Springfield Historical Society for Black Seniors, with the stipulation that the house be sold and the proceeds used to fund their community housing initiative. It was an organization Henry and I had supported for years. They helped maintain dignity and independence. It felt right. Mr. Avery was silent for a moment. That is a significant change. You are certain? I am certain. The Historical Society understands the value of a home as a legacy. My son does not. I will draft it today. Can you come in tomorrow to sign? I can. We ended the call. I sat with my tea, the steam warming my face. The final legal thread was being cut. The doorbell rang. It was Cynthia, holding a bakery bag. I let her in. She hugged me tightly, then held me at arm's length, her eyes searching my face. I heard every word from the sidewalk. You were magnificent. Absolute steel. She looked around. The place feels bigger. It is, I said. We sat at the table. She pulled out 2 still warm scones. Fuel. You must be exhausted. I am, I admitted, and it was true. A deep bone-level fatigue was setting in, but it was clean, like the fatigue after hard, honest work. What now? She asked, spreading jam on her scone. Now, I make it permanent. I'm seeing Avery tomorrow to change my will. Everything goes to the Historical Society Housing Fund. Cynthia's eyebrows shot up. Then she nodded slowly. Good, that's perfect. It turns the house into a legacy for a community, not a spoil for a traitor. She took a bite, chewed thoughtfully. He looked broken out there, Eleanor, Marcus. He made his choices, I said, and my voice did not waver. I know, I'm not saying you should feel guilty. I'm just reporting. He looked like a man who just realized the price of his ticket was everything. I did not respond to that. The price had been set by him, not by me. Later, after Cynthia left, I went to my bedroom, and opened the top drawer of my dresser. Beneath a stack of sweaters was a fireproof lockbox. Inside were my passport, my marriage certificate, and my last will and testament, executed 3 years after Henry's death. I took out the will. It was 10 pages long. I flipped to the signature page, to the clause that bequeathed my beloved home to my beloved son, Marcus. I carried the document to the kitchen. I did not tear it up in a rage. I fed it, page by careful page, into the shredder I kept for old bills. The machine whirred, its teeth reducing the legal language to fine, unreadable confetti. I emptied the shredder basket into the trash. That chapter was gone. The next morning I returned to Mr. Avery's office. The new will was waiting. It was shorter, clearer. It left a monetary gift to Cynthia, another to my church, and the rest, including the house and all its contents, to the Springfield Historical Society for Black Seniors, for the purpose stated. I read it through once. I signed where he indicated. He signed as a witness, and his paralegal served as the second. It was done in under 10 minutes. I will file this with the county, he said. The old will is formally revoked. You should keep this copy in a secure place. I will. Mrs. Beaumont, he said as I stood to leave, for what it's worth, I admire your resolve. What they planned was a form of elder abuse, even if they dressed it in family concern. You have protected yourself admirably. Thank you for providing the tools, I said. I drove home. The lawn was empty, just a few faint impressions in the grass where the desk had sat. The house stood, solid and familiar. I used my new key to enter. The sound of the lock turning was the same, but the meaning was different. It was not just a lock against the world. It was a lock against a specific, painful part of my past. I placed the new will in the lockbox and returned it to the drawer. I walked through each room, touching the spaces where their things had been. The guest room closet was empty. The office was just a room again, holding only the ghost of Henry's drafting table and my own memories. I could make it into anything now. A painting studio, perhaps. A library. The practical closure was complete. The locks were changed. The will was changed. All that remained was to live in the peace I had reclaimed. A week later, the house had settled into a new rhythm, one dictated solely by me. The emptiness where their things had been was no longer a void, but a space filled with my own breath, my own choices. I woke with the sun and made coffee only for myself. I read in the living room without the distraction of Chloe's cold sculpture on the mantel. The silence was a companion, not a judge. On Thursday afternoon, my book club met. We had rotated to my house this month. I did not host them in the living room. I ushered them into my bedroom. "Eleanor, this is lovely," said Margaret, one of the members, as they entered. I had rearranged the furniture. The bed was now positioned to maximize the morning light, and I had created a sitting area near the bay window with 2 armchairs brought from the guest room and a small tea table. Henry's bookshelves, which Chloe had called dated, were filled with our shared collection. My wedding photo was prominent on the dresser. "It's my sitting room now," I said. I decided I should enjoy the best space in my own house. Cynthia, already seated in one of the chairs, caught my eye and gave me a small, proud smile. The other women found places to sit, some on the edge of the bed, others in the chairs. Sunlight streamed in, catching motes of dust in the air. The room was filled with the soft chatter of friends, the clink of cups on saucers, the rustle of pages. We discussed the novel, a historical saga about a woman rebuilding her life. The conversation, as it often did, turned personal. "It's about reclaiming your narrative," Joan said, "not letting others write your story for you." I nodded, pouring more tea. "It is, and sometimes reclaiming it requires decisive action." No one asked about Marcus. The neighborhood gossip had done its work, and Cynthia had likely given them an edited but emphatic version. They offered their support through this normalcy, this gentle gathering in a room that was once a war zone. Their presence was a balm. The laughter that echoed off the walls was mine, and it was real. After they left, Cynthia stayed behind to help with the dishes. "You look well," she said, drying a plate. "I feel well," I replied. And I did. The constant low-grade ache of betrayal was still present, but it had receded, like an old injury that only twinges in certain weather. The dominant feeling was one of lightness. The next morning, I worked in the garden. It was a crisp, clear day. I knelt on the padded mat and dug my hands into the soil, weeding the flower beds Henry had designed. I cut back the spent summer blooms and trimmed the shrubs. The physical labor was satisfying. I was tending to my own ground, my own roots. The garage, where they had planned to put me, stood to my left. Its door was closed. It was just a garage again, a place for tools and memories, not a potential prison. As I was cleaning my tools at the outdoor faucet, the postal carrier came up the walk. "Afternoon, Eleanor. Got a few things for you." He handed me a stack of mail, advertisements, a magazine, a bill, and a plain white envelope. The return address was Marcus's apartment. My name was written in his familiar, hurried script. I took the mail inside. I sorted it at the kitchen table. I placed the bill to be paid, recycled the ads, set aside the magazine. The letter from Marcus III held for a moment. It was not thick. It likely contained a single page. I imagined what it might say. An apology, justifications, more anger, a plea. I felt no urge to open it. Opening it would be an invitation back into the drama, into the negotiation of pain and blame. I had said all I needed to say on the porch. He had heard me. Any words he had now were for his own conscience, not for my healing. I got up and walked to the hall table in the foyer. It had a small drawer. I opened it and placed the unopened envelope inside, on top of a stack of old birthday cards and postcards from trips Henry and I had taken. I closed the drawer. It was not a dramatic gesture, it was an administrative one. The letter was now filed under past. It could stay there. That evening, I cooked a simple meal for myself. I ate at the kitchen table, listening to a classical music station on the radio. After washing up, I returned to my bedroom, my sitting room. I turned on a single lamp and picked up the novel we would discuss next month. I read for an hour, engrossed. When my eyes grew tired, I marked my page and set the book aside. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dim room, lit only by the faint glow from the hallway. I looked around, at the walls that had heard whispers of exile and now held the echoes of friendship. At the window that showed my dark garden, my tended land. At the bed where I slept, in the room that was mine. There was no guilt, there was no simmering anger. There was, instead, a profound and quiet peace. The conflict was over. The house was secure. My future was my own. I had loved my son with everything I had. That love was real, and its end was a tragedy. But the greater tragedy would have been the slow death of my own spirit in a converted garage, watching from the sidelines as they lived my life. I had chosen myself. In doing so, I had not become the bitter crone Chloe named me. I had become sovereign. I rose and prepared for bed. The routines were the same, but the woman performing them was different, stronger, clearer. As I lay down and pulled the covers up, I felt a sense of completeness. The story they had tried to write for me had been erased. My own story, in this house, in this room, was just beginning, and it was mine to write, one quiet, peaceful day at a time. Outside, a gentle wind rustled the leaves in the garden. Inside, there was only silence and sleep and peace.